From a pretty baby who grew up in the spotlight to the subject of a shocking documentary, here's the untold truth of Brooke Shields. Whether it's from her famous ads in the 80s, her film career, or her hilarious guest appearance on Friends, which led to her own sitcom, Suddenly Susan, you know Brooke Shields. She's been recognizable for, well, pretty much her whole life. But for such a famous face and those unmistakable eyebrows, there's a lot that the public doesn't know about this actor, writer, and advocate. In a new Hulu documentary, Brooke Shields' Pretty Baby, directed by Lana Wilson, Shields looks back on her life and career and reveals secrets she's kept for years. And some of those secrets are dark. So we'll just say, trigger warning, discussion of sexual assault. Brooke has always been the face, and now we'll hear her voice. Even when you go right back to the very beginning, one thing remains the same. Brooke Shields was famous. Her mother was determined for her to have a career in show business, and so Shields started working at 11 months old, making her debut in an Ivory soap commercial. The work continued throughout her childhood and early teen years. She told The New Yorker, "I never knew anything different. I only knew working, and I only knew school and jobs." Her parents divorced when she was less than a year old, and her mother struggled with alcoholism. But even with her desire for Shields' success, she was careful to compartmentalize, a word Shields uses frequently and credits with her survival. Brooke says, "I went to school in Manhattan, and I only worked from 3 o'clock on. Even if they said, 'Oh, there's a 10 o'clock appointment for her,' my mom would be like, 'See you at 3. I always had these two concurrent existences and compartmentalized brilliantly." When she was 11 years old, Shields won a role in Louis Malle's film Pretty Baby, where she played a child prostitute. The role required several nude scenes, and while the film was praised by critics, seeing such an explicit and sexual role played by such a young actor stirred controversy. But Shields remains a fan of the movie. She even wrote her thesis on Malle and says, "I think it's the most beautiful movie I've ever made. It's the only real quality film I've ever been in." And in comparison to living with her mother, who she had to parent from a very young age, making movies felt safe and orderly. Even the content and what was asked of her wasn't intimidating or concerning to her at the time, with Shields saying, "I didn't have any shame as an 11-year-old. I didn't have budding sexuality and didn't have any qualms about the nudity or the film itself. People have wanted me to be a victim and feel abused. They wanted me to be a train wreck because I was an actress." It was actually an on-screen kiss between Brooke and actor Keith Carradine, who was nearly 30 at the time, which most intimidated the preteen Shields. It was Shields' first kiss, on-screen or off. Another risque role came when she was 15 in The Blue Lagoon. The many love scenes between cousins on a deserted island and extensive nudity kept Shields squarely in the center of controversy. Shields' hair was taped to her to prevent exposure, and a body double was used. But intercutting between a 30-year-old body and a teenage one is, well, that raises a whole bunch of other questions, doesn't it? A People magazine feature on the movie used the headline, "Too Much, Too Young?" And gossip columnist Rona Barrett compared the movie to child pornography. Critics panned it. It currently has 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences clearly didn't care what the critics thought. It was one of the top-grossing movies of the year, even with its R rating. Shortly after came another moment of public scrutiny, Shields' infamous Calvin Klein ads, which featured the tagline,
"You want to know what comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing."
One newspaper called the ads child sexploitation, and during this time, when Shields would do interviews or press for her films or modeling work, she was continually put on the spot and asked to defend her work. But even though she was shamed for appearing in material that alluded to or depicted sexuality, she was also held up as a girl to be admired for her beauty. Barbara Walters once asked for her measurements and told her to stand up so they could compare bodies. Only recently, on The Drew Barrymore Show, did Shields reveal how uncomfortable that moment was. In one interview, she was even asked to comment on her mother's alcoholism in front of her mother. Although the press continued to hound her, she remained an icon, a role model, someone young people could look up to and connect with. Through the controversies, they wrote to her with their questions and admiration. When she was 18, Shields left Hollywood and enrolled at Princeton University. While completing her degree, she wrote a book intended to be an honest look into her life at school. Shields wrote one chapter in which she talked candidly about the loneliness she was experiencing, how hard it was to be away from her mother for the first time, and even her thoughts on fame and how that contributed to her isolation. She even spoke about being a virgin, saying, "It was sad but very truthful. I was very proud of it." But the rest of the book, not written by Shields, had a very different tone. Shields says, "Then they just shoved it away, hired a ghostwriter, and it was like, I like leg warmers." The other chapters are about beauty and dating, which Shields said she didn't even try to do at the time, and Shields describes them as inane and vapid. Once again, Shields was asked to defend and explain herself, and then her voice had been taken away. After graduating from Princeton, Shields hit what she calls the lowest point in her career, and it was difficult for her to find work as an actor. When a supposed friend and Hollywood executive called to discuss a possible project, she was grateful for the opportunity, saying, "We had dinner and I thought it was a work meeting." He told her to come back to his hotel to call a cab, and while she was waiting in his room, Shields recalls, "The door opens and the person comes out naked. He's right on me, just like wrestling." At that moment and afterward, the word comes back again, compartmentalize. Brooke says, "It was really easy to disassociate because by then it was old hat. And because it was a fight or flight type of choice, fight was not an option. So you just leave your body. You're not there. It didn't happen." When she blamed herself and agonized over the moments that led to the attack, she used her experience as a model to keep it bottled inside, saying, "I'd always had a sense of disassociation from my body, from my sexuality, and it was just easier to shut myself off. I was good at it." She told only one friend. Until now, she's come forward in the hopes that others who have similar experiences won't feel alone. Talking about Pretty Baby, Shields says, "I'm fascinated with that journey of innocence to experience and who owns it. Do they become a victim to it, or do they not? It sounds like it could be her own story, or that of any number of young Hollywood starlets." Shields has used her intelligence and bravery at every step of her career and refused to become a victim. For a celebrity whose every move was scrutinized, whose choices were debated and criticized so publicly, a lot went unnoticed. People were quick to denounce her roles, her movies, and her work. But who was actually watching out for her? Where were the public eyes, the opinions? Where was the outcry over what happened to her and countless others like her off-screen? Where was the forum to talk about her attack and the violence she suffered, in the same way that her movies and looks were discussed? Denied a chance to truly be heard and overlooked when she did speak out, it's now Shields who's creating a space to be truthful, for herself and for others. So, from a public face that everyone wanted to look at, to private turmoil that finally everyone will hear, that's the untold truth about Brooke Shields.